excited. So bear with me as my words fall short and I begin to stumble over them. My name is Jack Moynihan, and I work on public philosophy in Athens, Georgia, not Greece, this summer. I work in association with Andy Messing. He was my mentor. Michael Lindquist was a great inspiration for me. He's a professor. He went to Wisconsin along here. But, yeah. So before we get started, I'm going to go into a quote and a couple facts. The first one is the quote: "Philosophy abandoned its concern with the meaning of life and focused most of its attention on the meaning of words." Through this podcast, I hope that I kind of rekindle what philosophy was founded on, the meaning of life and not the meaning of words. It's easy to get lost in the meaning of words, and it kind of confuses the argument. A lot of philosophers, and if you've taken a philosophy class, you know that they began to make a lot of new words. I didn't know you could really do that often, but they've done it. The second quote is something I want you to keep in mind as we go through the rest of these slides. Confucius was a governor, Maimonides was a physician, Descartes was a soldier, Hume was an administrator, Bishop Berkeley was a cleric, Spinoza was a lens grinder, Leibniz was a mathematician, and Julie Cooper was a school teacher. The list goes on and on. We can even say Jack is a cook, but that's not really that important. What is important about these facts is that up until about the 20th century, you couldn't just make it by being a philosopher. You had another profession, if you will, and that informed the philosophy that you would write. So, the what of what I did. Conceptions of public philosophy. What is it? Public philosophy has two current definitions. The first isn't the one I use, but I'll still give it to you. Public philosophy can be defined as taking concerns of, well, public concerns and talking about them philosophically. Some topical examples are women's rights, racism, and other rights like gun rights that are going on right now. That's not the approach I want to take. I want to take the more personal approach, which is akin to the second definition. The second definition is when you engage with the public philosophically. I know I said I wouldn't get too much into the words, but here we are. There's a slight nuance. I am approaching community members of Athens, Georgia, with my philosophical questions, much like Socrates did, just went around annoying people in Athens. Why this one, the second definition is more viable than the other, is because I am me. I'm a white man in the 21st century. All throughout history, people have heard white men talk, and they've, for the most part, dominated philosophical tradition until around the 1950s. So, if I can approach people and let them talk, it provides a platform for new and more exciting perspectives. Okay. The when and the where. Kind of how I arrived at public philosophy. Michael Lindquist was the chief instructor for the Philosophy for Children program, which is a program, a service learning program, where we went to a local library and debated philosophy with high schoolers and middle schoolers after school. They had nowhere else to go, so they came to the library and had to deal with a bunch of college students that had nothing better to do. And it really inspired me to see such young minds grappling with such hard questions, like what is art, what is architecture, is there beauty in architecture, so on and so forth. And why Athens provides such a unique opportunity and perspectives. The music scene, first and foremost, has been pioneered with REM, Pylon, the B-52s, all creating great new dimensions of music. There's fine dining. I have to throw that in there. I am a pastry chef. But there is an actual fine dining restaurant that I do not work at called 5 and 10. You can either get 5 meals or 10. Sounds expensive, I've never been. The University of Georgia, we get a lot of young minds working on hard problems. An active community, protests, rallies, all taking place on or around campus. and just the diversity that is provided through the town of Athens. The how. So what I'm going to go through is the structure of the podcast. Sorry, I had a friend do all these. All right, episode 0 kind of sets as a framework to the series, where I am, who I am, what I'm doing. Episode 1 is where we start with the personal interviews. They're one-on-one interviews. They took about an hour each, and we're done with community members, graduates, musicians, anyone and everyone I can talk to. Second is community interviews. These were shorter. At AFFest or any other large gathering, I would go out with my little mics and ask people questions. And finally, an academic interview, where, as it sounds, I interview an academic, a professional philosopher, if you will. What this structure, in my mind, embodies is the progression of a philosophical idea from the street level in episode 1 to episode 3 with the academic. So we can see the evolution, and while I am growing with the answers I'm getting, you two are learning. We're both learning together. Let's see. Study objectives. The benefits, pros, cons, and future endeavors. As I mentioned before, the benefit to this form of public philosophy, going through the podcast, and the con is both me. I prefer breadth over depth for the most part, but even still in the structure we get to see the evolution of the idea going from a simple conversation to a deeper idea. That is also its con, somewhat, but once we get to those later episodes, it is a much more refined idea where we have a more pointed discussion. Future endeavors and limitations. As I was conducting the podcast and recording, I think it was around 50 episodes, went to conferences and had a lot of conversations. History was unfolding before us. The questions that are important now hadn't happened yet. So going forward, I'd like those experiences to inform the questions I ask and who I ask and who I interact with. My results. I chose a pretty easy topic because I couldn't ever fail. I always knew people thought philosophically. It was a matter of showing everyone else. But with that, I think what I uncovered about myself and others is that people are beautiful. That the decisions we all make, the conversations we have, whether it's Frank, the owner of Marvin Shoe Service, the career he's chosen his entire life, the shirts or clothes we choose to wear, they all have a deeper meaning. Maybe I'm reading too much into things, but that is my job as a philosopher. I like to read. Thank you guys. So what that means is that you all too are beautiful. And as you go about the rest of your days, I hope that you keep that in your back pocket. That if you are asking other people or thinking to yourself, oh wow, that's a really pretty dress, or that's a really cool shirt, or that's a really neat turtle, people are then also asking the same of you. So you're never alone in that. And if you're ever concerned, you think you're alone, know that a guy with a mustache at the University of Georgia thinks you're beautiful. Going forward and how I plan to broadcast this, I'm going to skip that and I'll come back to that. It's going to be available on all platforms. That is the logo I have designed for it. Yes, I paid for that. Just type in Philosopher Beats, and the first series will be on art and aesthetics. The second one will be a 3-episode series on a conference I attended. Questions?
When you were in the community, did you run into any people from FS or whatever that didn't want to talk to you?
Yes.
Was there a pattern to that you noticed?
No. I mean, I try to approach people that were not doing anything, that didn't have like a kid to watch, or like if they did have a kid to watch, it was like strapped in and locked into something, like a harness. So it wouldn't wander off too far. But yeah, no, I feel like a lot of people were willing to offer their opinion. The first series that will be released is the art and aesthetics one, and for that one I interviewed a lot of musicians after their shows, and they were very excited to just be able to talk about what they love doing. So,
So you interviewed a lot of people. What's one thing that you learned that was meaningful to you?
I think what I learned, for me, I was always driven to communicate some greater message, come up here and say something cool like all the rest of you. And I think that finding beauty in others and having the patience to listen, like if you can go, in my case, and talk to someone randomly and hear them talk for an hour, call your mom, you know. So, yeah.
What was the most interesting answer that you got?
Interesting answer. There was one gentleman at a conference that I talked to. He was older, had a really nice voice, I remember that. And he said to me that you find a lot of answers by yourself and others through community and through interacting with them. And so that's why he enjoyed hopping on. We actually had a discussion before, like I was getting like a pastry because it was a conference and I was hungry. And he was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Interviews, you want to do one?" He's like, "No, I have nothing important to say." I was like, "Me neither. We can just sit there and not say anything." And he laughed and he was like, "I know what, you convinced me." And so, yeah, after that, it was a really nice conversation.
Where were we on your podcast, and did you learn anything like significant, like did you get something out of your journey?
It will be on iTunes, Spotify, I think the podcast app. I'm going through like a service that just puts it wherever, not wherever, everywhere, academically speaking. What I learned the most? I think patience was a big one for me. Yeah.
What are some of the questions
I went into all my interviews with an open mind and no script. I wanted each conversation to feel organic, which is why most interviews were an hour, and then I cut them down into like the snippets, like where they're talking most passionately, because you have to, in interviewing, in my opinion, I'm not quite a professional, you have to get through the barrier of pleasantries, and then people start opening up, and they open up in ways that you wouldn't expect, and that you can't really prepare for. You have to hear what they're saying, interact with what they're saying, and respond.
So what was the conference that you went to, and what was your biggest challenge?
It was a conference on campus, the Georgia Philosophical Society. Biggest challenge was equipment and editing. I outsourced editing and just making sure that everything came out how I thought it was coming out, because you have this great idea in your mind, and then you get it back and you're like, 1 second. And then like one time, I only made this mistake once, and it was, I think, one of my favorite interviews. Forgot to press record on like a 5 to 10 minute interview. It's heartbreaking at the moment, like aside, but yeah, that was the hardest challenge.
When is your podcast coming out?
It's waiting approval from Aaron Meskin. So, because it's going through in association with the philosophy department. So he's reviewing all the episodes now, can give me final comments, which I'll then give to the editor, and then he'll get back to me, and then I'll have it approved again, hopefully. And so probably the first episode will hopefully be out within a week. So, yeah.